Welcome to a football show here on the 440 Sports Network, of course, brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group. That is Zach Lyons at F-Words Pod. I am Braden Gall, of course. Thanks for joining us. And if you are watching us live, which we do appreciate, please share the product, whether that's on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. Give us a share, give us a subscribe, and then tell folks about it and get people involved so we can ask some more questions and get more interactive with you, the audience. Zach, we're going to do the offense today. We did the defense on Monday. Hope everybody caught that show. We established the fact that the Tennessee Titans have 4.5 starting players on the defense. Over under starting players on the offense. 4.5?
Higher. Easy. That was easy.
Easy. Okay. So we'll spend a lot of time today focused exclusively on the offense. We're going to go position by position, just like we did on Monday. We will look at who is a guaranteed starter, who's locked into their position. There's some guys under contract that are fighting for starting spots. How do we see those guys in terms of their future on the roster? Of course, there's pending free agents off of this particular offense. And then there's how do the Titans prioritize these positions in both free agency and the draft. So a lot of stuff to get to today on the show. Sinkers Beverages. I don't know about you, Zach, but I'm trying these new beverages that are apparently through some loophole in the state legislative body that allows for some things to be infused into the beverages.
Soda pot.
You can get, well, apparently, like you can get it at a lot of different places, but apparently completely legal and totally wonderful. just absolutely wonderful. Like for $3, you can drink one little can slowly if you want, or not so slowly, and just have a wonderfully relaxed evening after the kids go to bed. It's a great time to just relax. It helps you go to sleep, mellows you out. If you got any aches and pains from the day, I'm telling you, they got it at Sinkers Beverages. You can go to Sinkers Beverages and they got a whole array. It's right in their beer fridge. They got a whole selection. So not only do they have all of the wine and champagne and liquor and beer that you possibly need, non-alcoholic stuff, they have the pre-mixed drinks, they have mixes and everything. Join the in crowd as well. But Zach, the THC infused beverages that somehow, don't tell anybody, are fucking legal in this state. They're great. They're wonderful. My wife loves them. My wife loves them. So again, Uber Eats, search Sinkers Beverages, have them deliver that booze / other things directly to your house.
Can you give us a brand name?
If you give me a second, I can pull up a picture because I tried like 4 different, not at one time, by the way, that would be too much. 4 of them at one time would be too many. There was a can though that was 50 milligrams, and I was like, that seems too many milligrams. A couple of them are locally brewed actually, or I don't even know what you do it. You don't distill it. I don't know. I tried the High Rise, I tried the Crescent 9, and I've tried the Higher Vibes. All 3 are quite wonderful. I tried them on separate occasions, just to be very clear with everybody. I would not recommend trying them all at the same time. So
there you go.
That would be bad. Kingston Group, buildkg.com. Make sure you check out them as well. Also, don't imbibe of any kind when you're working on building a house or a remodel or anything like that. So there you go. Kingston Group, buildkg.com. Check out their social accounts. That really awesome work, and we'll tell more about them later. Speak for yourself, Braden. LOL. It's a high gravity beer. Are you talking about 50 milligrams? Is that what you're talking about? That's tomorrow night at the Billy Strings concert. Maybe I'll try the 20 milligram one tomorrow. We'll see. Anyway, it's great. They're great, and Sinkers has lots of great options. By the way, stackingtheinbox.com. All of your Titans offseason needs. There's a fantastic chat room in there, Zach, of which you are interacting with this audience and your audience. Cannot recommend enough. Great place to talk Titans at any time of the day. So check out that Substack there, stackingtheinbox.com. Not only just great writing and great videos and additional content from Zach, but an interactive way to discuss things not during a live show. So make sure you go check out stackingtheinbox.com. And today on the 440 Sports Network, we got Paul Kaharski's live show. We got this show. We got Hot Read Pod coming up later. There's no better place to get good Titans conversation than with F-Words, Stacking the Inbox, and 440 Sports. Just want to point that out there. Will Levis, is he a starter?
Yes. Okay. That's easy. He's the only quarterback on this roster that is guaranteed to be here in 2024, and probably the only one currently on it that will be here in 2024.
So Malik Willis has a couple years left in the contract, but it seems like they've learned as much as they possibly need from him. And frankly, I think this is one of the easiest and more important roster decisions that the Titans are going to make, which is go get a veteran backup. If you've got all this extra money, Tannehill's gone, of course. They'll figure out what to do with like the $3 million on Malik Willis's contract. I don't care about that, but like
cut him, you get $940K on your cap savings. So
there you go.
That's $940K you can use towards an incentive for someone else.
There are a lot of free agent quarterbacks available, most of whom would qualify as like pseudo veterans. I'm not sure I'd want to go that route if I was the Titans, but I do believe Will Levis is clearly your guy. There's no reason to think anything else. You're investing in him, around him, but I do like the idea of a smart veteran backup who processes information well and makes good decisions. I don't necessarily need a great athlete or even a young guy with upside. I want like Teddy Bridgewater or Jacoby Brissett or somebody like that has been around the league a long time to back up Will Levis.
Yeah, I mean, like you look at guys, there's Joe Flacco, Josh Dobbs. Heck, Jimmy G's getting released. You could probably bring Jimmy G in. He has a working relationship with Bo Hardigree. There's just all kinds of guys. There's no reason to keep Malik Willis. There's no reason to really feign a quarterback competition for the backup spot. I've been lately thinking about and subscribing to this idea that every year you should draft a quarterback. And not necessarily think that this is the right year to do it, but if you get to a spot and quarterback is really high on the board, and let's say that there's a guy like, I don't know, Joe Milton there. I don't know. I would throw a dart at Joe Milton over keeping Malik Willis. Like, at this point, you never know. Because, like, nobody knew, except for, I guess, the people in San Francisco. Nobody knows what a team values in a quarterback. And they got Brock Purdy, right? They traded up for Trey Lance. They end up drafting Brock Purdy in the 7th, and they had Jimmy G and all this stuff. They had all these guys. They signed Sam Darnold, like all this stuff, right? And the 7th round pick is who their starting quarterback is. And that happens quite frequently. You can find a 4th or 5th round quarterback that comes in a pinch. Bailey Zappi, for example, behind Mac Jones, who's better than Mac Jones, by the way. So there's guys
not a high bar.
Not a high bar, but there's guys out there that are like that. And at this point, look at what Gardner Minshew, and you don't need someone that necessarily starts. But if you find a Brock Purdy and Will Levis flames out, that's pretty damn good value to have. And so I think that until you have an elite franchise quarterback that for sure is an elite franchise quarterback, you need to be having a young backup quarterback plan.
But so I agree with your premise, which is if you don't have a star franchise quarterback, keep trying, keep swinging, keep taking hacks at it.
Sam Hartman's a better example, or maybe even a Spencer Rattler, depending on how high or low he goes. But then Joe Milton. Joe Milton was just the first name that popped in my head.
To your very first line in that what I think is very eloquent and thought out take. And by the way, Joshua, good to see you. Thanks for coming and joining us. We do appreciate it. I think not this year though. They need so many other things, so many players that I don't think they can afford to use a draft pick when they have a lot of free agency money to spend. And there are so many decent enough backups. I agree with you. I think if they go in, if we're here next year and we're still sort of like, I don't know if Will Levis is the guy, right? Like there's signs of good stuff.
Here's my thing. We'll know if Will Levis is the guy after this year. There's no doubt in my mind. There's no more excuses for Will Levis in year 2 with a offensive head coach. You're going to have an improved supporting cast on the wide receivers and the offensive line. It's almost guaranteed. There is no excuses for Will Levis. If he gets injured, guess what? That means he's been injured every year for the last 3 or 4 years, and he's probably going to continue to be injured. If he is inaccurate, they're not going to be tied down to Will Levis because this head coach he did not draft Will Levis. So this is his year to prove. Like right now, I'm 70%. Someone asked me this last night in the chat, in the stackinginbox.com chat, and they go, "How confident are you that Will Levis is the guy on a scale from 0 to 100?" And I said 70. But this is the year that's going to push me all the way in on Will Levis or all the way out on Will Levis. There's no middle ground. You don't have the luxury to be dicking around like he did with Marcus over because he wasn't the guy, and everybody clearly knew he wasn't going to be the guy in 2017.
Well, but 2017 would have been his third season, right?
Yeah.
And he had started more games at that point as well. I was just saying, hypothetically, if you still are unsure, because I agree with you. I'd like to think that they will know. Now, I think here's the injury question is interesting because if he plays really, really well, but then misses time with injury, then you're still in that sort of like, well, he still clearly looks like our guy from a talent perspective. The point is I could see them doing that next year, drafting a young quarterback with this much draft capital, or with this much free agent money and cap space, and this many veteran pieces in the quarterback spot in free agency. And you're clearly giving Will Levis the opportunity to earn the job or become the franchise guy. You always do that 20-60-20 thing where 20% is elite, 20% sucks, and 60% is kind of all in the middle. There's a good chance he just moves within that 60% this year. And the hope is that he moves upward enough to prove that he belongs. You can't do it this year. You need someone that can help him with just being around him through osmosis, getting smarter and better and quicker and processing more, and is just sort of a veteran stabilizing force. You don't need, and in case of an emergency and there happened to be in a playoff run and he gets injured for a game or two, he can come in and maybe not suck for a game or two. So again, Teddy Bridgewater, Jacoby Brissett,
Teddy Bridgewater's retired from the NFL, and he's a head coach of a high school football team. So
nice, good for him.
He's out of the NFL. So to me, it's Joe Flacco and Jacoby Brissett. Those are your two guys.
Yep.
I see a lot of people, and I would agree with Jake Browning if he wasn't a restricted free agent, because he's going to be going back to the Bengals. They're probably going to tender him exclusive rights free agent from ERFA, if I'm not mistaken. And I think that's only like $2.5 million to keep him in a system that you know that he can thrive in. But to me, it's like with Jacoby Brissett and Joe Flacco's who you just described. But there's also Gardner Minshew out there as well that you know can come in and win you games. He may not be, I don't know what kind of mentor or what kind of knowledge or anything that he can take Will Levis through and provide Will Levis.
Yeah.
But at least you know you're going to win a few games. But to me, it's what you described is Joe Flacco and Jacoby Brissett.
Brissett's the name. I saw a list of like 6 names, and they were a bunch of like Drew Lock type players and Jacoby Brissett. And I'm like, the only one that sounds interesting to me is the guy who like is a veteran who's been around enough to like stabilize. And because I think, and Trey says this, I care less about veteran presence, and I want a guy who can win if he comes off the bench. And I'm like, true, but the percentage of chance that this team is in a playoff hunt and they need a guy to win a game at the middle of the year or whatever is probably slim. So, but again, not out of the question. Either way, go get a veteran quarterback in free agency. Don't draft it, and let's get rid of Malik Willis. I think we both kind of agree on all of that from a strategic standpoint. And Will Levis is the guy. Running back, number one clear starter.
I disagree with Trey's comment here. I care less about vet presence and all. What happened to it? I care less about vet presence and all. I want a guy who can win if he comes off the bench. You're not winning anything.
Yeah.
But the vet guy provides you still the best chance. Like, to me, Jacoby Brissett's going to provide you a better chance to win than Drew Lock, Sam Darnold, Tyler Huntley. Who else is younger? Easton Stick.
I don't want any of these guys.
Kyle Allen. There's those guys. The guys that are veterans are the guys that also are going to give you the best chance to win.
Yep, I agree. And again, it's all about Levis here. Like we want Levis starting 17 games. That's what you want. And the chances of Levis starting 17 games or not, and this team being in a playoff hunt, crazy things happen in the NFL, but it seems unlikely. So again, all right, let's head to running back, of course, as we do our complete offseason offensive primer and preview here, brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group. Tyjae Spears, 3 more years left on his deal. He is going to be your starting tailback, at least for now. Also, much like veteran quarterbacks,
he's your starting tailback. I don't think there's a guy that's coming in I don't think they're going to invest in a guy that's going to be the guy that starts on opening day for this team.
Agreed. Could there be a 1A, 1B where the time split?
Yeah.
And the snaps and the touches are close-ish?
He's still 1A. Sure. He is your 1A.
I agree. So, but like with quarterback, and I do have a Derrick Henry question, which I know I'm contractually obligated to ask all Titans people about. there are so many high quality running backs that would give you a complementary skill set to Tyjae Spears that are going to be available in free agency. I don't know what they're going to do with Haskins. He's got 2 more years left on his deal, but it doesn't inspire me. Julius Chestnut is an ERFA, so they'll have exclusive rights with him. Could there be someone available late in the draft that is interesting to them? Cody Schrader or something like that?
I bet there's all kinds of people in that back.
Absolutely.
Malcolm Lloyd is a good one. Dylan Lobb is another one. Isaiah Davis, Isaac Gerudo, who I think will be really high on their list because he reminds me a lot of Raheem Mostert. And this is a team where the GM was around for Raheem Mostert. So I feel like there's going to be a lot right there.
I agree, and I really like Lloyd as a kid. He went from South Carolina to USC, I believe. Better pass catching ability than you think he is. Bama Brad says running back is where Carthon needs to show his analytic prowess. I agree. Brooks, Jesse says Brooks from Texas. That is an interesting one. I think he's like moving up boards too fast, honestly. Like, am I wrong on that to say that he's projected to go higher than I thought?
I don't know. I'm not really familiar with his game too much because I think he's too expensive to get for the Tennessee Titans, and he's always kind of been too expensive to get. So I kind of don't waste my time too much with guys that I know that are going to be out of their range. Brooks would be that guy to me. And here's the thing. And I was kind of thinking about this, when you look at how teams are constructed, and this is kind of going off a little tangent here, but when you look at how teams are constructed with their scouting staffs, right? This team had like, I think 17 or 18 scouts, and they scout different areas of the country, right? So they have been watching Jalen Brooks for a while, right? The problem is that when you start looking at these big boards, and they're individual big boards by one person, right? Daniel Jeremiah, for example. Daniel Jeremiah maybe has not gotten around to Jalen Brooks, right? I know Stoney hasn't gotten around to Jalen Brooks, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think he has. So maybe what you're seeing is someone that watches film, then puts him up. But the teams, again, the big boards that you see are just really hard to decipher what's real and what's not, because some of it is due to just them watching tape, right? It's not that someone else is bad. It's that someone, this guy's good.
Yep.
Because I watched his tape. But the tape has already been watched. The board has already been somewhat settled for most of these teams that don't have a new GM, new head coach, or new entire staff.
Yep.
Sorry, Jonathan, a little tangent.
No. I agree with you. Jonathan Brooks, I believe, is his name. But yes, I agree. Same thing. I think he's too expensive. Like I've seen him in like the second round. I'm like, that's not where the Titans should be spending their draft capital. QC Hawk says Dylan Johnson, with, of course, his running back coach on the staff. Dylan Johnson is a really nice-looking player for college. I don't know if he's an NFL prospect. I don't know how good he's going to be, and he's been banged up most of his career. So, again, I am okay with a 6th or 7th round running back, but I'm also okay with Devin Singletary, A.J. Dillon, Gus Edwards, Damian Harris, somebody that sort of complements Spears with a little bit more.
Not Damian Harris. Oh, God, please no.
Between, I like Dillon and Singletary the most, but a between the tackles physicality, not Derrick Henry, because I've got to ask you about that. Because I want you to kind of lay out for folks, like, what would it look like if Derrick Henry goes to free agency, tests the market, doesn't see what he likes, and then comes back to Tennessee. There are contract implications there if they re-sign him. So I'd like you to kind of lay that out quickly.
I have to waste my time on something that's not going to happen.
I don't think it's going to happen either. But if he goes out there,
go to stackingtheinbox.com, subscribe, because I've already written about all of this on Tuesday.
There you go.
So you can go read it at stackingtheinbox.com, so we don't have to waste our time on something that has a 0% chance happening. Derrick Henry is not coming back to the Tennessee Titans.
That's what I was going to ask you. Percentage chance is what I was going to ask
you. It is 0% chance, and you can read why. And here's 4 quick reasons why. And we talked about this in Football and Other Efforts towards the very end as well. First, he doesn't want to be here. He wants to be on a Super Bowl winning team, and a Super Bowl contending team will pick up Derrick Henry. 2, this team tried to trade Derrick Henry, so they don't want Derrick Henry. It's a mutual relationship of we don't want each other. 3, they're analytics forward, and what do the analytics people say? Running backs don't matter. And finally, the money. And if you want to get into all the money implications, stackingtheinbox.com.
QC says Braylon Allen too expensive, I assume, ? I do really like Braylon Allen as a player, but again, too expensive. I agree. I don't know.
We'll
I
have
think
plenty of time to talk about running back drafts
yeah.
and whether they're too expensive. It's way too early. Combine hasn't even happened yet.
Who do you?
I don't want to get into I don't want to say Braylon Allen is too expensive because right now he's like 4th or 5th round, but he may be 3rd round.
Yep.
By the time this is all said and done.
I think his size speed combo is going to push him up boards a little bit, but that's my personal assumption. Yes, exactly. Who do you like in the free agent class? Do you like that? I mean, again, what's cool about this, kind of like middle linebacker, is that you just don't have to spend a lot of money to get a productive player. And there's a whole lot of them in the free agency class. A lot of guys, you could kind of pick and choose a skill set that I don't like a lot of the small guys because they already kind of have a guy who does the stuff that those small guys do. But there's a lot of sort of guys that sort of would complement Tyjae Spears, I think, in a supplemental role.
I think guys that have connections to the team would be who I would be probably focused on a little bit, even if they play against them. But Kareem Hunt, who has been around Bill Callahan, Antonio Gibson, who's been around Randy Jordan. I would say also, you mentioned Gus Edwards. Gus Edwards is another guy who has played against the Bengals for a couple of years now. Guys like that are probably where it's at. Devin Singletary, I would imagine he goes back to the Texans.
Yeah.
I look at, these top tier guys like Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard, Saquon Barkley, Austin Eckler. I would like Tony Pollard because I'm a Memphis guy and I've been a big believer in Tony Pollard as much as I've been a believer in Tyjae Spears. But at this point, I don't think that at this point, I think he's too expensive. Deontay Foreman doesn't really do much for me. I'm pretty much a always look forward, never backwards guy right now. So I think the 3 guys I named, Gus Edwards, Kareem Hunt, Antonio Gibson, and A.J. Dillon would all be guys that could do something with this team. I still like De'Aaron Johnson because he played really well behind at Cleveland, behind 2 guys, but he didn't really do much last year with the Jacksonville Jaguars, so I don't know. That's something I would have to leave open for Bill Callahan to tell me.
Yep. All right, let's do tight ends here because I'm going to save the 2 big ones for last. Let's do tight ends here. So far, we have 2 starters. That's good. We're off to a good start. Tight ends.
2 more right here.
Chig under contract, 2 years, very affordable. Josh Wiley, of course, under contract, 3 more years, very affordable. Here's what I would say. Whatever lineup you want to roll out there, there's a chance these guys may or may not be technically starters based on formation, 21 personnel, 13 personnel, whatever it might be, and everything in between. But if you are saying that the Titans are going to have 3 tight ends on the roster, these are 2 of them. So they are absolutely roster players.
2 starters.
And right now they are your 2 starters.
Yeah. They're your 2 starters.
How about Thomas Odukoye? What do you think about him?
He's a guy that has never done anything. So there you go.
I agree.
To be honest, I mean, I think that a lot of people, I think Titans fans need to drop their darlings. Drop your darlings off. Like your Thomas Odukoyes, your Mason Kinseys, your Nick Westbrook-Akines, these guys that people have fallen in love with in various forms or fashion that man, I can't believe this staff didn't put him up on this team. Listen, if that dumbass staff that just left couldn't find a place for these guys, this better staff's not going to.
I drop your darlings off. My brain went to like a bunch of middle school jokes. So look, what's interesting about these 2 guys, in my opinion, is that if they want Brock Bowers or find a good piece in free agency, whatever it may be, I don't know, Mike Gesicki. I'm not talking about like bottom tier guys, but maybe somebody that could be a true starter or a true number 1. I don't know if Dalton Schultz counts or whatever, but there's a couple names on the free agent list. Nothing special. But I think they're in a very flexible position with these 2 guys. Because if they really love Brock Bowers and think that Brock Bowers is the answer, and he truly is Travis Kelce piece you can build around for the next 12 years, which I would argue he is, then you can draft him and feel totally comfortable putting him atop a list of 3 really good tight ends. If they don't go get Brock Bowers or spend a bunch of money in free agency on a top piece, I think you can supplement it with an Irv Smith or whatever, or a blocking tight end, and have 3 tight ends that you feel comfortable about. So I think these 2 guys give them a good, flexible situation to work from, if that makes sense.
Well, they also finally have a tight end coach that has coached tight ends And I think that's going to make a big difference in both of these guys. I mean, Tony Deuce has never coached tight ends before, right? Like, I mean, they have an actual tight ends coach now. And what he has done, and I don't know if Mercedes Lewis is still floating around out there, but that is a guy that obviously J.O. has coached over in Green Bay. And J.O. has coached those 3 years. They're 14th in EPA on their tight ends, EPA per target, and a top 14 in each of those years. One of those years, they were first. So I feel a lot better about this tight end class. I also am not convinced that Josh Wiley isn't your blocking tight end just because of 1 year last year. I think he has the size that you're looking for, the athleticism. Chig was a little bit better last year than he was the previous year as far as blocking. But at the end of the day, now they have a coach that could teach them proper technique that he has seen work with Mercedes Lewis. So in my mind, I think that it's kind of like a reset again for these two guys in a new offense and a better coach.
Yes.
I'm not looking for Jeff Swain, is what I'm saying, or Trevon Wesco.
Yes.
If you want to bring back Kevin Rader, they're probably not going to because they probably have never heard of Kevin Rader. But for the most part, I think that
I only coach actual football players.
I don't think this team needs a blocking only tight end, but I think that if you want one, you can get one. But I don't know if that's the route this team goes because we don't really know truly what this offense is looking for.
And why not find a tight end that can block well enough and also do other things? Like you don't have to fill an entire spot.
That's why I think that there's going to be a lot of good development from Josh Wiley and Chigakonkwo.
And yes, Bo, Mercedes Lewis is, I think, 49 years old. I think he's actually 39, honestly. I'm not kidding about that. I don't know. There's a couple of interesting options on the free agent market, but I think ultimately this is sort of like Brock Bowers or ride with Chig and Josh Wiley, supplement with some free agency, and I think you're good to go at tight end from a positive or a negative. Okay. That brings us, courtesy, all this, of course, coverage brought to you by Seeger's Beverages and the Kingston Group. There you have it. Who's joining the show? Which one is joining the show?
That is Huxley barking. Okay. Or no, that's Havana barking at Huxley because Huxley's laying in his bed, not paying attention to her.
Do they still make out? Like, are they still making out frequently?
No.
Okay. Are dogs that ultimately, this is the most important question of the show. Are dogs that live together, like of the opposite sex, are they lovers and partners and like couples, or are they brother and sister?
These are brother and sister.
Well, but in the state of Tennessee, you can, I believe, legally now marry your first cousin. So
there you go.
You never know. Welcome to the 21st century, Tennessee. I appreciate it. All right. Wide receiver. Let's go with wide receiver first. And we had this conversation, I think, kind of about the defense is different because middle linebacker is just a complete void of talent altogether. But corner, we like there's a nice piece there in Roger McCreary, but like really we don't have any number ones. I think that's sort of comparable to the offensive line. There's some nice depth pieces there potentially, but on short-term contracts that are question marks, we don't really have an elite starting tackle or a starting tackle of any kind to talk about. Whereas with pass rusher, you have Harold Landry, right, who's the one guy who's kind of established player, and then a lot of question marks behind him. And I think the receiver is more of the pass rusher, where they have DeAndre Hopkins and some guys under contract that could be starters. They're going to have to earn it, and they're going to have to prove that they can stay healthy. But Treylon Burks under contract for a couple of years, Kyle Phillips under contract for a couple of years, Colton Dowell under contract for a couple of years. Like there are actual living, breathing, alive human beings on the roster, on the roster for more than this year, and there is a good elite number one player at that position at wide receiver. So even in doing this exercise for the defense, I felt like I learned something about the focus and the resources for corner being the top priority on defense and defensive end and pass rusher. And I think I did the same thing with this process, which keeps pushing me towards offensive line. We'll get to that in a second. But at receiver, how many starters you got outside of Hopkins? Anybody?
No, well, hell no. You've seen this roster? That is an emphatic hell no. I have one. So you remember, for those that may not listen to the defense, it was starters. For me, I broke it down as starters, potential starters, long shots, and depth players. I don't have any potential starters at wide receiver either.
Okay.
Long shot starter, and that would be Kyle Phillips if, by chance that he could stay healthy and they decide they want to use someone that's a little bit smaller than they normally have used in the past. And then other than that, your depth pieces are just Treylon Burks and Colton Dow. They're depth pieces. You can't rely on them to be top 4 wide receivers right now.
So here's how I would look at the depth chart. I don't know, not esoterically, but just sort of in theory. Hopkins, number 1. Number 2, not on the roster. There's not a number 2 on the roster. Treylon,
there's not a number 3 on the roster technically.
Depending on what role you want out of your number 3, if you want him to be slot, then there's a chance that could be Kyle Phillips. If you want it to be true 3 wide in a little bit more of an outside threat position, I think it's Treylon Burks. I think Treylon Burks.
Well, you got to find someone.
No question.
As it sits right now, yes, it would be Treylon Burks. But if Treylon Burks is still your 3rd wide receiver, when you go into camp and the scenario you just laid out, you've really messed up your opportunities.
Well, that would require 2. That would require 2 pieces for sure, which is possible. Yes. Draft and free agency.
Well, it'd be very easy to do, to find 2 better pieces in free agency and the draft. You could find 2 in free agency. You could find 2 in the draft. You could find 1 in each. And I don't care. But there are 2 better wide receivers, a glorious amount of options that are better than Treylon Burks.
Could I make the case? Because I think more of his athletic ability than maybe you do, but or health or whatever the issues are. Because I think that he has post hype stamped all over him. Because I think he is the guy that could benefit the most from the coaching change. It doesn't mean he's going to stay healthy. It doesn't mean he's going to be good. It doesn't mean anything. But if I am saying who do I think could benefit the most from Brian Callahan being the head coach of the Tennessee Titans, it is Treylon Burks. Because that raw athletic ability is still there. And if Brian Callahan can just create some level of consistency, I think Treylon Burks absolutely is still a viable, usable weapon for the offense. Is he a number 1 or a number 2? Not even close. He's got to prove consistency and stability and availability to get to that point. But I think, I would say he's absolutely a potential starter. I would say Kyle Phillips is a potential starter or long shot for both of them, but I think they're about the same. And then I think Colton Dow is I don't know if he even makes the team. They liked him because of his special teams.
Phillips has proved it on a consistent basis. He's a reliable target, and they just didn't use him consistently for the Tennessee Titans. Burks has proven that he is a wildly inconsistent, unreliable player who has no clue how to use his physicality and athleticism in the NFL. It's ridiculous. Again, going back to football and other F words, I've read this dissertation, and because we kind of talked about the process of how we go about evaluating players. And this article that I read was talking about how in the 2 most important data points, they think they have a third, but they didn't have enough data back to past 2018. But the 2 most important data points that they have found that correlate to NFL success are success against press man coverage and EPA. And Burks was one of the worst in both. And here you are. In that draft class, by the way. So in that particular draft class, he was the worst in both. And to me, it's just and we've talked about this constantly. The Tennessee Titans ran Carthon. As much as we love what has happened since the firing of Mike Vrabel, we cannot forget how quick on the trigger Amy Adams Strunk is. He cannot afford to go into some of these position groups and not take advantage of the depth that is either in free agency or the draft or combined both in these position groups. And this is wide receiver. You have to walk away with 2 to 3 wide receivers. In my opinion, I think you need 3. You need 3 wide receivers. I don't care how you get them. 3 wide receivers on this team to push everybody else down. And none of those guys they're pending free agents. You need upgrades. You need to be working to upgrade everything on your roster that you can. And this is the year to do that for wide receiver.
Well, there's a billion good receivers available in free agency as well. You can go high. You could go high end. We T. Higgins is a conversation. I guess. I think he's going to be tagged and not going to get away from Cincinnati. But Michael Pittman, Calvin Ridley, there's guys that are on that top tier. Marquise Brown might be on that tier. Maybe he's the tier below that. You've got Tyler Boyd, of course.
They're not going to 0% chance they're interested in Marquise Brown.
Curtis Samuel.
He's nothing. Curtis Samuel's bad. He's just a little bit more successful. Traylon Burks. I'm out on these guys. Give me Gabe Davis. I think he's a lot better than everybody that you mentioned so far. I like Calvin Ridley, but I don't know what Nick Holtz's relationship is with Calvin Ridley. Yeah. There's some Darnell Mooney, but don't know his relationship with Tyke Tolbert, right? So there are some players out there. I'm just a big believer in this wide receiver draft class, and I think for me, it's just like Traylon Burks. He's had 2 years to prove that he can be something, and he's had one good game.
No, I agree. I'm just, I don't see. I think again, this is Traylon Burks is like house
Boyd, by the way.
He's like house money to me. Like he's all right. You're Brian Callahan. You come in. You know you've got a former first-round pick who got drafted that way for a reason because of his skills. You are a great developer of talent at this position and in an offense that is supposed to be maximizing players like this. It's house money, whatever you get out of him. But to suggest that it's nothing because he's, maybe I don't know. You're not going to. I don't know what this dead cap money would be, but he's
for me. It's just like I'm looking towards the future, and Traylon Burks is in my plan. If I was general manager, these players that were from John Robinson's draft class are very few and far between in my plans for the future.
No, I don't disagree with you on that, and I think Ridley, and I'm just going to use these names as stand-ins because I don't know how they evaluate them, and you and I may disagree on who we like or don't like, but Ridley, Higgins, and Pittman are 3 names that I'll just use as like, I guess Mike Evans might be in that conversation as well, but Mike Evans even to me is different because he is not a guy that helps you long-term. So like the reason Ridley, Higgins, and Pittman keep coming up for people, not just the tie to Cincinnati, but it's because if you sign them to a 4 or 5 year contract and pay them big-time money, it's not just like Mike Evans is more of a short-term play. Whereas if you get one of these 3 guys, sure, you might be on the hook for a whole lot of money, but he's a guy that's going to be Will Levis's top target for the next 4 or 5 years. And I think that's where you can help yourself, not just in 1 year, but in multiple years. But that still means you have to go draft somebody. But after doing the defensive exercise,
right? Because I don't know if his top target. I don't know if any of those guys overtake first off DeAndre Hopkins as his top target. And I don't really know if any of those guys would overtake a Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze as their top target. So, I feel like what we need. I feel like setting an expectation on this wide receiver thing in free agency because I like a lot of these free agents class. Right, I like a lot of these free agents. I like Calvin Ridley. I personally like Calvin Ridley. I like Tyler Boyd. I'd be fine with taking flyers on guys that are kind of like when you're taking flyers on some defensive backs like Paris Campbell or DJ Chark, not guys that you would consider them upgrades. I like Noah Brown. I think he showed that he can be a reliable target. I like Gabe Davis, like I talked about, Darnell Mooney.
I like Gabe Davis.
Take a chance on Donovan Peoples-Jones. He had a kind of a weird last year. I still really like Trent Sherfield. Or Sterling Shepard is another guy who can't stay healthy, but in a reduced role. And I think Darius Slayton is also a free agent. I'm not entirely sure on that, but all this to say, these are all upgrades over in various forms and fashions over what you had last year, but after DeAndre Hopkins. And the point that I want to convey is if you get one of these guys, you probably still need 2 more guys in the draft. And I'm okay with spending the draft on 2 wide receivers. You need as many wide receivers as possible because you need 2 guys that you can train up to be with Will Levis. Gabe Davis is like the only guy right now that's available that you could say, okay, well, he could kind of grow up with because he's only 24 years old.
How old is Ridley?
Ridley is 29, by the way.
What?
But I mean, yeah. He's been in. You got to remember, he missed like a year and a half of the NFL.
So I guess that knocks him down a year because he sat out for the gambling thing.
So he's like 20. He's like 27 and a half. About to turn 28
in real real numbers.
Yeah, in NFL age.
Jesus, that guy's way older than I thought he was. Tyler Boyd is also 29. Curtis Samuel's 27. He's a guy that's versatile. Mike Evans is 30. I did not expect Ridley and Evans to be that close in age. T. Higgins only 25.
It's kind of
Michael
crazy,
Pittman,
isn't it?
It really is, actually, now that I'm looking at it. Michael Pittman is 26. So Pittman is a guy that, again, you're not overtaking Hopkins now, but assuming that Hopkins is around for 1 year, let's say, and he's gone after that. If you go get one of these bigger names, you've got a dynamic twosome this year for Will Levis, but then also you're preparing to lose Hopkins later on.
Can I ask a question, though? And I know you're probably just using this as an example, but Michael Pittman and DeAndre Hopkins aren't they the same? They're
very
not
similar.
Dynamic.
They're very similar. Yeah. Now, I
feel like a dynamic duo need to be different.
There needs to be let's hypothetically call it an early 3rd round pick or a late 2nd round pick, Xavier Worthy, to package with those two guys. Somebody that can be fast and speedy and take the top off, for lack of a better cliche. But I do think Pittman and Hopkins is still extremely productive together. And then
they're a lot better than what you've had for like 2 or 3 years.
It's the best tandem.
I'm not going to really complain if they end up with like Michael Pittman, DeAndre Hopkins. I just, I'm just saying that,
the key is they're
kind of the same.
He's your succession plan for Hopkins.
Yeah.
Whereas maybe I need to rethink the money for Ridley then because of the age, even though, again, he's more like 27 and a half, but like still at 29 and Mike Evans at almost 31, those two guys aren't going to be like heir apparents for the next 4 years after Hopkins leaves. Whereas I think Pittman could be that guy for you. So, and Higgins that way as well. If you go get Higgins, maybe it's $20 million a year, which is insane in your head. But at the same time, that's taking over the money from Hopkins for 3 of those 4 years or whatever. So I think that's the way you look at it is the reason I think there's one big ticket item in free agency. I don't think it's a pass rusher, although that's possible. Corner, receiver, tackle, they could go. I have a feeling there is at least one big ticket item, for lack of a better term, maybe a second one. And receiver is a good place to do that if you've got a proven commodity that you can pair with Hopkins. And you're looking to help Will Levis. Like I don't know. I think you're asking a lot of Neighbors or a Dunze or one of those guys at 7 to come in and be immediate production as a number 2. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they can be that good with Will Levis, whereas I think the offensive line is a far bigger priority. But we'll get to that in a second. So draft in the 3rd round if they get a pick there. I think the class is deeper. To your point, in our talk on Monday, I think there's a really good chance that it's not offensive line receiver with 1 and 2. That there's some sort of other cornerback wild card that gets thrown in there with their first 2 picks. So there you go. Wide receiver. No NWI. Kiaris Jackson, you like him at all? Practice squad?
For what?
Practice squad. Punts.
Someone else asked about Trayshawn Harrison. I'm like, for what? Like, what's
that was Stoney. That was Stoney. All right. So starters. So we've got you're counting Levis, Spears, Hopkins, Chig, and Wiley. That's 5 so far.
Yep.
That's a lot. That's a lot. A lot of young talent there, by the way. Yeah. That's a lot of guys. And again, a number 1 running back, a number 1 quarterback, a number 1 tight end, or excuse me, number 1 receiver. There's not a lot of Titans teams that have come into the year with those 3 guys, other than the A.J. Brown couple of seasons. All right, offensive line. I've got Peter Skoronski penciled in at left guard, and that's it.
Brunskill.
Brunskill at right guard or center?
Doesn't matter. He's started.
Okay, he's got 1 year left on his deal.
I don't know where they're going to put him, but he'll be a starter. That's all I know. I mean, and that's fine. If he's right guard, he's right guard. If he's center, he's center. He's under contract. He fills a hole that he's a good starter, and he's going to be with Bill Callahan. And I just don't see any reason to not say that he's a starter somewhere on this offensive line.
I agree with you because you have to have enough people to play football.
Right.
At some point.
And maybe he's not the starter day one. Maybe someone else is drafted or free agent, but we're talking about how the roster sits right now. And how the roster sits right now, Daniel Brunskill's definitely a starting player that they don't have to. He fills a position somewhere on this offensive line. I don't know how they view it, but he fills a position that you don't have to make a priority in free agency or the draft.
I tend to agree. And otherwise, you've got Brunskill, 1 year deal, Dylan Radins, 1 year deal, Ojukwu and Rupchich are depth pieces at best. 1-year deal. You've got MPF with 2 years left on his deal, and Jalen Duncan with 3 years left on his deal, and then there's Andre Dillard, which I assume is a $7.5 million dead cap hit.
He'll get cut. He saved $2-something million, and if you wait until the deadline, I tweeted this out last night. If you wait, and cut him a couple of days after free agency starts, $3 more million of his base salary becomes guaranteed, and then that is $3 million off for $3 million extra, or taken off of your cap savings if you wanted to make him June 1st cut. So
gotcha.
Take the cap savings. He's getting cut. I agree. Floored.
That is
that's a fireable offense. So, like we talked about, Amy Adams-Strunk having a quick trigger. It's a fireable offense on Red Carthon. Go ahead and fire him now.
So again, that's a $10 million contract this year. It's about 7.6, I think, if you cut him as soon as you can.
You get $2-something million if you cut him before. So get that cap savings. Take that $2 extra million.
I agree, but god damn, that's a bad use of money. I'm with you.
Well, it was. Yeah, it was. I mean, it was last year, but I mean, what are you going to do? Keep him and pay him for more?
No,
right?
No, I agree.
It's a sunk cost. Dead money. I keep telling people this. Dead money is a sunk cost. If you cut him, guess if you don't cut them, you're still paying that money. So just go ahead. If you got cap savings, go ahead and get it. But we'll say this, talking about the depth. So here's how I got it. I got 2 starters, Peter Skronsky, Daniel Brunskill.
Okay. I'll agree with that.
Potential starter where it's just kind of like put one of these players in here. Dylan Radins or NPF. Okay. Yeah, and then I got a long shot starter. Whoever you don't put in the potential starter, I got under long shot starters, Duncan and that guy. And then in depth, I got Ojukwu and whoever doesn't make that cut. So it's like on the offensive line, I have 2 starters, 1 potential starter, 1 long shot starter, and 2 depth players. Just pick and choose your own adventure after Brunskill and Peter Skronsky.
So I actually think so. As terrible as the Titans' offensive line was, and as bad as the depth looks from a long-term perspective. By the way, Brewer, Hubbard, and Corey Levin, the 3 names that are free agents that I guess I'm not sure you consider bringing any of them back. But
I would consider Hubbard and Levin, definitely not Brewer. I swear to God, if they bring back Brewer and pay him any kind of money, fire Rank Carthon.
What is fascinating to me about this? What is fascinating to me about this is you have a lot of athletic ability with Dylan Radins, a lot of athletic ability with MPF, and a lot of athletic ability with Jalen Duncan. You now have an offensive line coach that is among the best in the NFL. My assumption is that one of those 3 guys becomes a starter. Maybe not a great starter, but a starter. I'm not sure who one of those guys are, and I'm not sure where they're going to play, to be honest with you. It's probably right tackle, but I don't know. I don't know. So,
and I agree with Ed Henry. He says, doesn't there have to be one reclamation project? Yeah, and I put that's your potential starter. You know, under Bill Callahan, isn't there one and so to me, that's your potential starter guy, because I don't know who that's going to be. So I can't say, well, for sure, you know, Dylan Radins is going to be a starter. I think that it could be anybody between Radins, Duncan, and NPF. One of those guys is going to start on this offense.
Yes.
Offensive line. I'd be I'd be pleasantly surprised if none of them made the offensive line, because that means that your offensive line was filled out correctly in the offseason and filled out with top tier free agents. So I'm okay if none of them make the offensive line, but I feel like one of them is going to make this offensive line. Everybody just needs to come to peace with that.
I agree. Tyrone Smith, Jonah Williams, Andrews Pete, Kevin Zeitler, Connor Williams, Cody Whitehair, Dalton Risner. There are options at center or guard. Not as many at tackle. If you want to go big with Smith or Williams, I guess in theory that could work. But again, to your point, if Brunskill's your right guard, hypothetically, or center, you go sign one of those pieces. Skronsky's your left guard. Bill Callahan created creature for right tackle. It leaves a pretty obvious focus with the 7th pick or wherever their first round pick might be, because there are so many good starting options in the top 15 picks of the first round of the draft. And because you have Hopkins And because the deep class of the wide receiver, like I am closer and closer to saying, look, I agree with everything you say, Zach, about they need starting players no matter what the position. So go get starters. Go get the best players possible. If that's Brock Bowers, fucking fine. But the point is, go get starting players. The good news is that tackle and receiver are two of their top priorities, and they have a lot of quality in the draft with those two pieces. I am more and more on the offensive line, corner, receiver as their first 3 picks. That could include a trade back. But I think corner is higher on their priority list than I initially assumed. And I think like there are no of their 2 starting corners, they're not on the roster. At least I could see Bill Callahan developing one of these guys into a starter at right tackle. Then you go address the position in free agency. Just like receiver, they're going to have to go at this a lot of different ways. And there's just not too many starters there.
You know, I think the question everybody kind of needs to be asking themselves, because first off, listen, if they were able to walk away with Andre James, the center out of Las Vegas, and Robert Hunt, I would be just excited. The emotions just thinking about it would be your interior offensive line is just amazing at that point. But the question you need to be asking yourself, Titans fans, is what's better for your team? Peter Skoronski, Andre James, Daniel Brunskill, or Peter Skoronski, Daniel Brunskill's Robert Hunt? And I think I lean Robert Hunt over Andre James.
Okay.
But that's just me.
Okay. The question I have is, and we've talked about this, what they do in free agency will give us a lot of clarity into what they value in the draft. I think looking at the draft even closer, there are plenty of teams that could want quarterbacks in the early teens that might be interested in trading up to that 7th pick. If a quarterback either falls or a quarterback is going before them. There's a lot of good tackles that could be taken between 7 and 15 in the first round of this draft. There's a lot of great receivers that are going to be available between 35 and 50 or 35 and 60 in the draft. If they go spend big on Jonah Williams or they go spend big on Calvin Ridley, using those names as stand-ins, that will give us a lot of clarity as to what they're focused on. Even with the assumption that even if they do that, they still have to add pieces in other ways as well. So even if you sign Jonah Williams to a big deal or Tyron Smith, you still need another tackle in the draft.
I plead to them. Just take your chances with someone on this roster over taking chances of a guy that gave up a shit ton of pressures.
I think it's all
I would rather see Radens than Jonah Williams. Like that's where I'm at on Jonah Williams.
I tend to agree. I'm just saying they could spend on a piece. It doesn't preclude them from going to draft Joe Alt at 7. They could go spend on Calvin Ridley. It does. I think that is more likely to preclude them from taking a receiver at 7. Because, again, there's lots of great receivers in the 2nd and 3rd round. And if you have Hopkins and Ridley or Hopkins and Higgins or Hopkins and fill in the blank with a bigger name piece, you really don't need the receiver immediately. You need it long-term, but you don't need it for this year. And you need an offensive lineman fucking right now. You've got to protect Will Levis.
Even if they were to go, and we talked about this last night, we talked about Tyron Smith, right? Obvious ties to Bill Callahan. He's one of the few first-round offensive linemen in Bill Callahan's coaching career that was drafted in the first round. I look at him. He can't be relied upon, but he doesn't want to retire. So he has the history with Bill Callahan. He comes here. I worry that Tyron Smith would preclude you from drafting a left tackle at 7.
Okay.
That is like your Calvin Ridley, Tyron Smith.
Okay.
Because then you have Tyron Smith and then you have maybe NPF Radens or Jalen Duncan you develop behind the scenes.
33 years old.
Maybe you draft someone in like the 5th round or the 6th round, maybe like a Delmar Glaze, who I think is going to be a guy that people are like, who the fuck is Delmar Glaze?
What a great name, though.
Let me tell you something. It's a great name, but he's someone that's really, I think, is going to surprise how high he goes.
When I get
Stoney's probably like really excited that I've mentioned Delmar Glaze now 3 times.
When I get the pork butt going at 2 a.m., I'm always thinking about Delmar Glaze.
Get glazing the glaze. That's what we talked about. But I just feel like at this point, like, if Tyron Smith is in, this shouldn't be the case, in my opinion. Draft good players. Draft great players in pick 7. But I do feel that, if you get Tyron Smith, then it's wide receiver. right? Like they're going to go wide receiver, or they're going to go,
I guess.
Brock Bowers or something. I think that Tyron Smith is probably the only left tackle in free agency that precludes the Tennessee Titans from taking Alter Fashanu at 7th.
So I'm counting it.
Something people should monitor.
I agree. It seems, I don't know. I know there's been some big tackle free agents that have changed teams in the past, Trent Williams, namely, that have done a really, really good job and have worked. But it doesn't seem to be a thing that, unless I'm just like missing the last few years. I mean, normally elite left tackles don't hit the
Dwayne
market.
Brown would be another guy.
I mean, Tunsil was traded, right?
He may have been traded. Yeah, Tunsil and Brown were both traded.
It feels like left
been left tackles, but I mean, Tyron Smith it's a little bit different over in Dallas because they do have such an O-line factory over there.
Yeah.
But part of the reason why is because Bill Callahan has laid down a good foundation for Dallas when he was over at Dallas. Another guy, a guy that wouldn't preclude you from taking someone, but that I really do like is Cornelius Lucas. I think that's a name to put on your radar.
Yeah.
He was over with the Commanders, so Randy Jordan would know him. Bill Callahan, I don't know if him and Bill Callahan cross paths when Callahan was also with the Commanders, but he's a little bit older. But he's a guy that wouldn't preclude you from taking, but he would be a good insurance piece if those guys were off the board.
Well, so, and I know Herndon has talked a lot about this as well, and I agree with what you're saying. I think left tackles are more like quarterbacks than they are receivers in that the good ones don't normally get to market. Receivers get to market at a higher rate. The other thing is that, and Herndon talked about this, and it's just a fact, it is much easier to find an all-pro receiver or Pro Bowl level receiver in the second round and third round than it is to find an all-pro or Pro Bowl level tackle. And the Titans currently have an elite number one receiver or top, let's not say elite, one of the better number one receivers, and they have no number one tackles. So like if you start, to me, just from like a logic standpoint, not only are they harder to find and tougher to get in free agency, but you have to draft them higher as well. It all logically screams tackle. That may not be what they do. They may like somebody else. So
I don't know what the dates are on this thing, but the guy who does the RAS, okay? So the guy who does the RAS relative athletic score, who is Kentley Platt at MathBomb on X. The percentage of Pro Bowlers for all the different positions that were drafted in the first round. Offensive tackle and wide receiver are the bottom two. Safety. There are more safeties. 58% of safeties drafted in the first round during whatever time frame this is were 24 safeties. Free safeties, by the way, have been drafted in the first round. 58% have gone on to be at least one Pro Bowler.
I assume
29% of OTs.
I'm assuming that's because I'm assuming that's only because one or two safeties go in the first round, and to go in the first round, you must be very, very good. Like you must be graded out extremely. It's like guards, centers,
that's why it's a percentage, right? I mean, the percentage takes away. Well, when you're talking about 24 safeties and 24 free safeties have been drafted in the first round. 14 of them have gone on to the Pro Bowl.
And how many tackles were drafted in the first round over that same
That would be 87. And that would be 26. But that's why it's a percentage. Or a percentage rate takes away what you're talking about.
But that's talking about hit rate though. You're talking about percentage change. Like, yeah, no, I understand math. I get it. I'm just saying, like, it is harder. It is easier to find an all pro, and maybe all pro is the better term, whatever, a great starting high quality player. It is easier to find a wide receiver in the second, third, and fourth round than it is to find those tackles in the second, third, and fourth round. It doesn't mean that doesn't apply to Joe Alter Odunze. It doesn't apply.
To your point, a wide receiver in round 2, 115 have been drafted. 24 have become Pro Bowlers. That's 20.87%. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but that is fourth best out of the second round position groups. So all the position groups in the second round, that is actually fourth best, 20.87%. OT is 16.39.
So there you go. What were the top three positions?
Running back, offensive center, and linebacker. Sorry for saying offensive center. I was about to say offensive coordinator. It says OC instead of just C.
Offensive coordinate. No, but again, that also tracks, I think, with logic. Running backs, centers, and middle linebackers, generally, the top 2 or 3 guys are going in the second round. Maybe 1 or 2 go in the first round, but generally, the best of the best are going in the second round. And just like safeties, you get a couple in the first round. I just think that the draft is
offensive tackles really don't have a good hit rate in any round.
It's because offensive line sucks these
just
days.
Interesting. That's just
they suck. There's a problem.
Why it's better to have teachers.
I agree. There's a problem at offensive line in every level of football right now. We've talked about it on this show. I talk about it on the SEC show. SEC offensive lines, they're the best teams in America. They have problems with developing players on the offensive line. High schools are having trouble developing offensive linemen. The NFL is there is a problem, and the reason is we've been playing 7-on-7 tournaments for 15 years, and offensive and defensive linemen don't get any reps. The other positions get thousands of more reps per year, and now we're 15 years into these 7-on-7 tournaments, taking over our summers and springs, and these offensive linemen have no reps when they get to camp in August on any level, high school, college, or pro. And it's why they're the position that is the most difficult to evaluate. I've talked to so many coaches about recruiting about this, that the lowest hit rate of recruits is offensive line, because their bodies change at different times, different years. You develop different skill sets at different times in different years. It's just very difficult to develop and track and pinpoint offensive linemen. It just is. It's just hard. It is what
I will say this: the neighbors in the Doomsday to AD Mitchell and Worthy is the much larger gap from Alta Fashanu to Patrick Paul and Biden. The more I kind of do a little bit of research on AD Mitchell and Xavier Worthy, the more I'm become less sold on them.
Third round, not second round, third round.
Yeah. I'm kind of getting there with you.
Yeah. I think you said this. You said trade back from the second round pick, which is 38, I believe, back to acquire an extra third. I like that to be then the target of the receiver. I think corner is where they are going in the top. If they pick in the top 10 picks of the second round, I think they are taking a corner.
I wouldn't be surprised. Kamari Lassiter. There's a guy that I gotta bring up on the radar, McGlothern from Arkansas. I gotta really
He's one name.
What's his first name? I can't remember.
One name, McGlovern. One name.
Dwight McGlothern, I think is his name. But there's a couple of guys on the cornerback group that really, and they love the Tennessee Titans. Love this new group, at least does. Loves athletic cornerbacks, and I'm very excited because RAS stock is up.
Got to play in space, man. It's a space game. Got to play in space.
Yep.
And corners. And to our point about offensive line being more difficult to evaluate, I think corners are getting better at playing in the modern NFL system, which is this pass-happy, quarterback, receiver-friendly thing that we've built over the last 15 years. Cornerbacks are getting better. They understand now how to play in it better than ever before. So go get a corner. They're going to go get one. Yes, a nice super bad. One name.
Several. I think they're going to get several cornerbacks.
So let's wrap up. We're going long. Sinkers Beverages, Kingston Group, stack in the inbox. We appreciate all that. So we had 4 or 5 starters, 4.5 really on the defense. So a lot of work to do.
15 of 25 players for the offense. We said offense. 25 and 25, right? So we have 27 of 50.
So 7 potential starters, though, on the offense. Yeah. Not almost all of the positions of need. Our receiver and offensive line.
54% of the way there to fill out this roster.
God, that's not a good starting point. I feel like there should be a better spot than that. But thanks, John Robinson. We do appreciate all that you do for the organization.
Yes.
Okay. All right. That about does it. Have a great weekend. I'll see y'all at Billy Strings on Saturday night. I'll see y'all at Geodis Park on Sunday, or Billy Strings on Friday night. Geodis Park on Sunday. And if you want to get into some Nashville SC, the season gets started Sunday. Club and Country podcast. Make sure you check that out. Our great and awesome friend Wes Bowling. If you're thinking about him, it's Will Bowling's older brother. He's dealing with some family stuff in Canada right now, with some heavy hearts. So just make sure you're thinking about him. But if you're into Nashville SC, check out the Club and Country Pod, T-Football Live, all the other great Titan shows, Music City Audible, F Words Pod, Paul Karski podcast, Hot Read Show, all the shows from the 440 Sports Network. We got you covered, I promise. We have everything you need. Gold standard covering the Predators. You don't need to go anywhere else. Just stick it right here. We do appreciate you guys' support and support all the great local businesses that keep these shows free for all of you guys. So stackingtheinbox.com, go sign up, be a subscriber, support Zach and all the work that he's doing with all the great folks that contribute with him, and maybe jump into that chat room. Start using that chat room a little bit more to talk Titans. So just value add for stackingtheinbox.com subscribers. So go check it out. For Zach, I am Braden. Thank you for listening. Sinkers Beverages, Kingston Group. Thanks to all of you guys for hanging out. We will talk to you guys on Monday. Have a great weekend, everybody.